anything that matters.
Talk a little bit about your blog, Callahan's Cleveland Diary. How did it get started? What do you really write about?
Well, I work as a community organizer. I've been doing that for a long time. And I've been in and out of just discussion groups with friends and stuff. And one of the things I discovered in being in email groups is it was a very good writing exercise, very good thought exercise to just take an issue and write something about it and have people respond to it. And that's not something you get to do a lot when you're working as an organizer because you're focused, you're focused on the organizing process. You're not focused on what you're thinking about issues. So I had actually started, found Blogger, started a blog a year earlier. Didn't really happen. And then one day I was driving back into town from the east side. I'd just been out to Micro Centers or something, and was looking at the skyline from the shoreway with the lake kind of spread out above it, and it just dawned on me that I was looking at an international border, right? And I started thinking a lot, believe it or not, about why there wasn't a ferry from Cleveland to Ontario. Went home, got on Google, looked and discovered that indeed there was a ferry in the works from Cleveland to Ontario, that it was an actual policy issue. And I was thinking to myself, you're driving around thinking these things, you spend an awful lot of time in a car, you just ought to start writing it down, putting it online, so you can get, nobody will read it probably. And so that's the reason I got started. What I said in the first interview was, this is just basically a place where I'm going to write down stuff that isn't about the topics I organize about, but is the stuff I think about as I'm sitting in a car, having lived in Cleveland for 30 years and thought about public issues. And I have no idea how George stumbled across it, but he did. And so like most bloggers in town, it got picked up in the network basically by being quoted on Broodfish Daily. That was 3 years ago. And
you're still doing it.
Just keep writing it, right? Like everybody else, I get into this guilt trip about, nobody, and I'm going to lose my hit count if I don't write something today. Not that my hit count is worth that much.
Your blog tends to be more policy stuff, and I think it's more, the content is a lot deeper than a lot of other kind of quick hit paragraph or two. You really drill down deep, and you've got a lot of key issues that you look at that you're kind of focused on, like internet accessibility. I know the COPE Act is something that you've written quite a bit about lately. Are there issues that you continue to see that you're going to continue to write about? Are there new things that are kind of emerging? Or is it just things pop in your head and you just write about it?
No.
Or you try to follow the story the whole way?
Well, I try to do that, but look, I think that the value of blogs is, as a blog reader, is that you get some idea of how some other people think. That's the actual attraction. People may write about the same issues, but if they're actually making an effort, you get different angles on the issue, you get different cultural takes on the issue. You get in that way, it's the same value as having a lot of conversations with fairly bright people about things that are of interest to you or them. So my background is as a community consumer organizer on neighborhood and consumer issues. And in those roles, I've had to be a researcher. I've had to learn about the issues. It's just part of what you do. So I actually know a lot, not as an academic expert, but as somebody who's had to try to learn about it from the ground up, about utility rate setting, about a lot of neighborhood issues. I was a CDC director for 6 years. There's a list of other things. And there's some other things that I care about because from that background, I understand possibly better than some other folks why they matter to people, like urban home rule. The reason I care about home rule is because people in my line of work are always going to the city government, like to try to get a living wage passed. And if the city doesn't have the right to do that, then, and usually home rule issues are about somebody trying to take that right away because the city is doing something that some special interest doesn't like. So those are personal interests where I actually know something. And if you can say some stuff that other people don't know in a forum where they'll learn from it, that adds some value to the conversation.
Real quick, because I know the band's going to start. Meet the Bloggers, a year old. What's been your favorite or most interesting experience of Meet the Bloggers?
I don't actually think I know how to answer that question.
How many have you done?
How many have I personally done? I've probably done a quarter of them, and many more earlier ones than later ones. And I still think that the most interesting ones were the ones with the mayoral candidates, because they really were sort of trying to lay out some real arguments about a series of issues that they knew people, they were trying to communicate. But I also think the Strickland interviews and some of the other statewide interviews were interesting. I mean, in the sense that they were good reflections of the people who were being talked to, the people you could really hear on those tapes or on those MP3s, the person who was sitting in the room. Those were good interviews. And obviously the ones that happened after George improved the sound are more fun than the ones you can't really hear.
You're still good.
Yeah, right.
Well, Bill Callahan, he blogs
at
Callahan'sFoodandDiary.net.com. I have a bookmark, so I don't remember it off the top. And one of the co-founders of MeetTheBloggers.net here at Bloggapalooza 2006.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.